Hello guys, welcome to Virtual Friday. I'm Greg Belt. I'm part of the customer service automation help desk support team. I've been with MiTek over 19 years now. I'm one of the techs you would get if you call the 1-800 number. I answer that number if I'm not doing a blade training session or if I'm not on the road at a customer site working with a customer. Today, I was asked to do this Virtual Friday. We're going to cover printers. Basically, we're going to cover caring and maintenance for your printers. We're not going to get in a whole lot of setting up printers or troubleshooting printers. Today's main goal is to clean and maintain your printers so they have a long life with a lot less headaches on your end. Let's go ahead and get started on our Virtual Friday. The first thing we have, this is just our outline, basically what we're going to cover. Basic overview. We're going to cover all the parts of the print systems for a blade saw and for a Cyber AT saw. We're going to do the cleaning, flushing and purging, flushing the nozzles. We're going to cover up some of the consumables that you want to keep on hand. And we're going to just do basic maintenance and give you a list of parts that you may want to keep for repairs. The overview of the printers. This is the location and purpose of most components. So this is on a blade saw here. This would be in the bottom cabinet in the front of your saw, under the saw chamber, left-hand door. You can see that this one here has 2 will be set up for 3 bottles. You may have an empty slot. That all depends on how many print heads you have and the nozzle count on those print heads. So you could have a 7 valve, a 16 valve, a 32 valve. You could have up to 3 of those print heads. So you're always going to have 1 cleaner bottle. We try to keep that over in the right. Right to the right of those print bottles, you have your safety pop-off valve. This little valve here is very important. This is a 15 PSI safety pop-off valve. This is protecting our print heads in case we'd have a bad regulator or something would happen and the pressure increases in our system, that we don't damage our print heads. To the right of that, we have our print regulator, and we have the knob to adjust our print pressure. We have those. We're going to talk about pressures later on and what we want. This is just the overview of our print bottles, our cleaner bottles, and our pop-off valve and where it's located on the saw. On the Cyber AT saw, this center picture here, we have a touchscreen monitor that's from Matthews. Up underneath it is our print controller. And somewhere on this tray, these are movable, so we want to move them and clean out from underneath them. But they sit on the tray. We have our pressure unit here. That's going to supply the 4 to 7 PSI the print system needs. And then we also have our print bottles on this unit as well. You can see all the cables going back and the tubing lines going up. That is going over to our print head or to the monitor. The right picture here is just a basic print head. This happens to be a 32 valve. This picture is taken on a blade saw. This would be one of the front face or rear face printers, and it happens to be a 32 valve printer. Continuing on, we're going to get to the air source. For the blade saw, this first picture here, we have incoming air into a shutoff valve. This shutoff valve also has holes at the bottom for our lockout tagout. It also has a venting system in it. So when we shut air off, it automatically relieves pressure on the blade saw and lets that air pressure drain down. When we push this down, you're going to hear the air expel from there, and that's going to relieve the pressure. So our clamps are going to fall down and all that good stuff. So just make sure when you push this down, you understand what's going to happen. As we move across the filter regulator assembly, in here we have a filter. It is a serviceable filter. And then down here we do have a small drain. You should only be getting a few drops of air out of this weekly if you need to drain that at all. There is a sight glass there. If you see a bunch of moisture building up, we may need to look at what's going on with our air system. We have a gauge that will tell us what our pressure is coming in. And we have a regulator at the top that you lift up and you would turn it clockwise or to the right to increase pressure or turn it down to decrease pressure. To the left here, this little with the gray cable coming in, this is our pressure indicator, our switch. If you get a low pressure fault on your screen, it's coming from this sensor right in here, coming back to the PLC telling it, hey, I don't have enough air pressure. We're not going to let anything run on the saw until we figure out what's going on with air pressure. The pressure switch, we're coming through to this junction here. We got multiple air lines going to multiple valves and regulators on the machine. One of these lines coming out is going to that regulator in the previous screen that is for the pressure of the print system. The unit over here on the right is the pressure unit. It's a standalone pressure unit. This is a regulator here. Again, shows you a nice little picture here. We're gonna turn it clockwise to increase pressure. We're going to turn it counterclockwise to decrease pressure. We have a gauge here that's going to show us our system pressure. We have an on and off switch down here for power. We also have a cable that's quick disconnect. This is a 120 volt power supply that the customer will supply 120 volts to this. We do not get the power for this pressure system from the saw. That's very important. When we lock out, tag out the saw, this unit still could be energized. Most likely is still energized. So we need to power it down here and physically unplug it to make sure that nothing happens. That would be a lockout, tag out procedure for this unit itself. These on the Cyber AT or the Cyber Saw with this Matthew setup, this unit here is delivering 4 to 7 psi is the normal. The blade saw has 110 psi coming into it, and we regulate that down at the print regulator. Again, we'll talk about this later on. This is the regulators for both saws. So again, this is that knob on the blade saw. This is down right next to your print bottles. You can kind of see the print bottles here. This is that black line coming in from that junction point. We try to keep this at 12 psi or less. These gauges sometimes do go bad. That is the main reason regulators fail as well. That is the main reason of this pressure valve here. This pressure valve is very important. This is set for 15 psi from the factory. When it hits more than 15 psi, this valve unit will pop up and you will hear air escaping from there. It makes a pretty large racket and a vibration sound of air escaping at the time. If that's the case, you can simply push down on the top of it. We don't want to push too hard. If it resets and stays seated, you're probably okay. If for some reason this would pop off again or continuously pop off, we need to look into the regulator or the valve to see what's going on. The safety valves normally do not go bad. It's normally a regulator or a gauge malfunction that's not letting you know how much pressure is going through that, or a bad regulator. Please never tie this down, tape this down. The whole reason this is here is to protect your print head. If you start holding this down when it should not be in the down position, you could damage your print head. We don't want to do that. That is basically the regulator setup on the blade saw. On the Cyber AT system over here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to, it has a decal here showing you increase pressure. We turn it clockwise, decrease, we turn it to the right. We have the gauge here. We should be running 4 to 7 psi. And then we have the power, incoming power from a customer supplied voltage source. The on-off power button is right here to turn power on and off. Clean and inspect print heads daily. We can't state that enough. When we do this, we're going to lock out and tag out the electrical system and turn off air. You're going to verify that pressure has been relieved. When I say that, the gauges should be at 0 and the bottles should not be stuck in their storage containers anymore. You should be able to lift up on the print bottles and make sure there's no pressure inside those bottles. You can tell by the feel of those bottles whether or not they have pressure in them. Sometimes you do have to crack the bottle slightly to relieve all of the pressure, but you can tell that the pressure has definitely been decreased. We're going to vacuum around the printing system component. We never want to blow air into a print head. That is a sure way to damage the nozzles. We want around the print bottles to be clean so we're not getting sawdust on our filter assemblies and our tubing assemblies. We want to be able to inspect all that to make sure everything is working and no leaks are present. We're going to check all the electrical cables and connections just to make sure everything's out of the way, nothing's rubbing, nothing's getting damaged. You're going to look at all your fluid tubing and connections and make sure you don't see any leaks at any junction points or any tubings getting worn. And then you're going to look at some of the boards that have been coming out of the saw. We're going to make sure what the print quality looks like. Make sure that the image is on the boards where we want it. We're going to check the ink and cleaner levels in the reservoir. Now is a good time while we're already cleaning everything. We're going to have all the safety equipment out. We're going to have everything ready to service them. Now would be a good time to add ink or cleaner if we need it. We're going to run 3 or 4 hours before we clean the print heads again. We want to make sure we got enough fluid to at least get to that point, or we need to do it now. We're going to clean the faceplate of the print heads as needed, or for the cleaning instructions, which we're telling you we recommend twice a day or twice a shift. Supplies for cleaning. These are the cleaning supplies that we use in-house on our blade saw for training. We have a lockout tagout device. We have our brush. We have our cup. We have our safety glasses and our gloves. It is important that these are acetone approved. I highly recommend, if you have prescription glasses, that you wear the goggles or the over the glasses safety glasses. Acetone can damage some of the coatings on the prescription glasses. We have a bottle of cleaner. We have a bottle of ink. We have our paper towels. I'm using this for cleanup, and I'm using it to protect things when I'm brushing the print heads themselves. I have a can of acetone. I use this for spills or excess ink that I've spilled or on the machine, or just basic cleanup. I'm not using this acetone on the print heads. I'm only using the Matthews cleaner on the print heads, but I don't need to waste my Matthews cleaner on the concrete floor or on the floor or anything like that. I also have a bottle that I'm going to use to store my paint brushes or my brushes from Matthews for the ink. I'm also going to have one for purging later on. And again, here's the vacuum. I'm going to use that vacuum to vacuum around the print heads, around the print bottles. We don't want to put compressed air anywhere near the print heads. And I want to make sure I have all of the sawdust out of the area where my filter assemblies may land as I'm changing ink bottles. The picture on the right, you can actually see this is the blade saw main filter regulator assembly. I have my lockout tagout going through that shutoff valve that we talked about earlier in the screen. Cleaning the print heads. When to clean is twice per shift. If you call in with a problem with your print heads and you're worried about the image, or maybe your print head you think is leaking ink, we're going to ask you when's the last time you cleaned your print head. We're going to ask you to clean that area, and we're going to ask you to clean your print head itself. So when we get into cleaning of the print heads, we're going to start off with the blade saw. This little handle is inside your saw chamber on the left-hand side here. Very important. So for the blade saw, before I lock out, tag out, I'm going to make sure the top clamp is up. I'm going to open up the saw chamber. I'm going to lock this handle in the lock position, because once I hit my E-stop and once I do my lockout tag out, that top clamp's going to fall down without this being in position. You can lift it, but it becomes an extra step that I don't have to do if I do it in the correct order. Once I'm locked out, tagged out, I can go ahead and place rags, towels, paper towels, whatever, underneath the print heads. I can make sure any of the cables in that area where this acetone is going to drip is covered. I will use the brush with the Matthews cleaner, and I'm going to brush those print heads, and I'm going to brush them from side to side. I will not wipe down the print heads. I will catch the extra cleaner at the bottom of it, but we don't want to wipe the face of those printers. We have sawdust on those printers. We have a lot of sawdust in the area, but we don't want to force that sawdust into those nozzles by rubbing them or pressing them, wiping them down. Cleaning the print heads, the cleaner, Matthews recommends only using their cleaner and their ink. That is part of the warranty agreement, is that you're using their chemicals that they are providing. It's their own cleaner, their own print ink. So we don't use water or any other chemicals for cleaning the print heads. I do try to store that paintbrush or that brush for the print heads in a bottle. I like a wide mouth bottle, kind of like a Gatorade bottle or something like that. The plastic bags, Ziploc bags, do not work well. A lot of guys have tried using those to keep the bristles moist on the brushes. The acetone will eat through a brush, so a bottle works good. The old cleaner bottles are acceptable, but a lot of times you can't put the lid on and secure it because they're not tall enough for the brush. I just use a water bottle or a Gatorade bottle, something like that, that I've cleaned out thoroughly. The spray bottles are not a great idea on this system because the cleaner gets on cables, tubing. It gets on areas that we really necessarily don't want the cleaner to get to, especially on a blade saw. We have linear bearings, we have electrical connections, we have a lot of things right around those print heads. It's just very easy just to use the brush. We can get everything done we needed with a brush. We really don't need a spray bottle. The brush, what we do is we take a little bit of the cleaner from Matthews, we put it in a cup, and we dip the brush into the cup and we brush the face of those printers. We don't want to dip that brush into a cleaner bottle that we're going to use on the blade saw. We contaminate that cleaner or bring any dirt into there that we're going to be using to filter and then run it through our print heads. We want that cleaner to be unused, brand new bottle, cut the top and put it into action. Again, after we get done cleaning and brushing the face, we're going to put that brush in a bottle. I always like to put a lid on it. We got to keep the dirt out of there because we're going to be putting that on our print heads, brushing the nozzles with it. We want this brush to be something we're taking care of, keeping it clean. It is acceptable to leave the cleaner in a brush bottle to keep it flexible. Like I said, you're going to want a taller bottle so you can put that lid on. We do not recommend you using water to wash that brush. Just keep that brush, keep it in a bottle with the cleaning solution or with the cleaner. When it's damaged, either replace it from Matthews is the best thing to do. You can kind of look at the texture of it. You can get by with a paintbrush in a pinch, but the Matthews print head brush is the one we recommend. Flushing and purging the print heads and the lines, they're pretty similar. We do them at the same time, basically. So you're going to flush and purge. We do it if the print heads are going to be idle for more than 48 hours, is what Matthews recommends. It is completely up to you. Everything we're talking about today is to increase the function of this print head, take care of it, keep your costs down, take care of your print head so you get the most use out of it you can. So 48 hours, if it's anything over 48 hours or close to 48 hours, I would always purge and flush. Basically, what we refer to as flushing is when we force old fluid out of the lines until the new fluid comes through the print head nozzles. That Flushing we're going to do with the screens or the valves we're going to talk about here in a minute. That is actually the print heads. Purging is we have a purge valve on the lines. It's a quicker way to get the ink or the cleaner to the print heads. It opens up a larger port, forcing that chemical to the print head faster. We will get into all that. For flushing and purging, again, make sure you have gloves that are acceptable for acetone or alcohol, depending on the system you have. Make sure you have goggles that are over the glasses, safety glasses if you have prescription glasses. And then we have a cup or a bottle, and we have some rags there ready to clean up any spills. So flushing and purging, both of these are typically done at the same time. We have a video on our YouTube page already, so we're not going to redo that video. We're just going to go ahead and play this video for you now on how to flush the print heads for the weekend or for anything that's going to be more than that 48 hours.
How to flush the printheads for the weekend. It is important to flush the printheads prior to your printer having a break from printing that is over 48 hours. The blade saw can have up to 3 printheads: front, rear, and edge, and there are different combinations. The front printhead always has either a 16 or 32 valve printhead. The rear printhead can have either a 7 or 32 valve printhead. The printhead is the key if it only has 7 valves instead of 32. This will be explained later. The edge printhead will only have 7 valves. You can tell the number of valves a printhead has by physically looking at the size of the printheads when it's time. The safety equipment needed to proceed is face protection such as goggles or a face shield and rubber gloves. Other supplies needed are an empty container for waste collection and some shop towels. To start, send the gripper to the max distance away from the top clamp assembly. You will need to do a proper lockout-tagout procedure on the machine's main electrical panel. Remove the wing nuts holding the plexiglass shield onto the top clamp guard assembly to gain access to the purge valves. Save the wing nuts for reuse. Here are the general locations of the purge valves for the 3 printheads your machine may have. Now's the time to look at the printheads to determine how many your machine has and the number of valves they have. In this example, we will use the front printhead. Place a shop towel in front of the printhead nozzles. Reverse the lockout-tagout procedure. Go to the Detailed Diagnostic screen and select the Printers tab. Select Front from the drop-down menu, then select Cleaner. Place the manual purge valve for that printhead into the empty container for waste collection. Then pull back on the valve and hold until the ink is gone and the cleaner is coming out. Go back to the touchscreen and press the flush button a couple of times. This will flush cleaner into the head and through the needle valves of the printhead. The explanation on the rear printhead being the key. If the rear printhead only has 7 valves instead of 32 valves, first you need to turn the manual hand valve to switch it from the ink bottle to the cleaner bottle. Please note, if your machine has a 32 valve rear printhead or no rear printhead at all, and no edge printhead, you will not have the manual hand valve on your machine. Now select Rear from the drop-down menu. You will not have to select Cleaner as it is grayed out if the printhead only has 7 valves. Follow the same manual purge and screen flush procedure as the front printhead. If your machine has an edge printhead and a 7-valve rear printhead, you have already turned the hand valve to change from the ink bottle to the cleaner bottle. If the rear printhead that you flushed has a 32-valve printhead, turn the manual hand valve now to switch from the ink bottle to the cleaner bottle. Select Edge from the drop-down menu and follow the same manual purge and screen flush procedure as the front and rear printer heads. When you are ready to resume production, go to the Detailed Diagnostic screen and select the Printer tab. In the pull-down menu, choose a printhead, front, rear, or edge, and then select Ink. If you had to turn the manual hand valve to switch from the ink bottle to the cleaner bottle for the rear or edge printhead, if your machine has them, turn it back to switch it back to the ink bottle. Place a shop towel in front of the printhead nozzles you selected. Place the manual purge valve for the selected printhead into an empty container, then pull back on the valve and hold it until the cleaner is gone and the ink comes out. Go back to the screen and press the flush button a couple of times. This will flush the ink into the head and through the needle valves. Repeat this process for the remaining printheads on your machine. When finished, do a proper lockout-tagout procedure on the machine's main electrical panel. Reinstall the plexiglass shield using the wing nuts you saved onto the top clamp guard assembly. Reverse the lockout-tagout procedure.
Here we are again, just to go over this one more time, the purging of the lines. On the blade saw, we're going to raise that top clamp. So once that top clamp is in the up position, we're going to open the saw chamber door and we're going to flip this lever. It's going to lock that top clamp in the up position. For the Cyber AT, we're going to make sure that there's multiple E-stops on the machine. We just want to make sure that nothing's going to move when we're back there. We're not on site from the operator. I highly recommend you're using some E-stops over on the stationary end main panel. We can actually even power down the saw on a Cyber AT or a Cyber saw because it has its own power unit that is not powered by the saw or should not be powered by the saw. We're going to do this anytime we're changing from cleaner to ink, or if we're going to be down for that 48 hours without printing. And then the purge valve is right here. Every print head on the blade saw and on the Cyber AT saw will have a purge valve of its own. If you have 3 print heads, you need to be doing this 3 times on a blade saw. On the Cyber saw, there's only 1 print head on there, so you're only going to have 1 of these. But just be aware on the blade saw that there is multiple heads, or multiple print heads. You're going to have multiple purge valves. We're going to get into flushing nozzles on the blade saw. Flushing the nozzles on the blade saw is where we're actually going to flush the print head itself, and we're going to be using that chemical coming through the print head. On the blade saw, you can use the software, or you will use the software if it's a 16 or 32 valve print head. If you have an edge printer or a 7 valve printer in general, you're going to have this black handle here. This black handle will be to the left of the print bottles and the print system. It's on the far left side of your saw. So you're going to have to open up that door to like where the ink is again. Look to the far left and you're going to see this black handle. And this will manually switch between cleaner and ink. This is on a 7 valve printer. On the blade saw, you're going to open up the diagnostics and you're going to go to the printer tab and you're going to pick the print head you have, front or rear. And then you're going to pick, are we going to use ink or cleaner? When you switch to ink, that means I'm going to be putting ink to my purge valve and I'm going to be flushing with ink. If I'm printing, cutting, and I'm going to start my weekend, I would actually hit this to cleaner. I would go to my purge valve, purge till cleaner came out, and then I would have my towels in under the print heads, and I'm going to purge it. This is only going to purge the front. So if you have a front and a rear printer, you have to do this process twice. Once for the front, you're going to come select it and hit rear. And then again, if you have the 7 valve printer, you're going to switch it here. You're going to come here and you're going to hit flush on the 7 valve as well. For the Cyber AT, you have a Matthews touchscreen over on the saw stand. You can do it at the touchscreen for the printer. It's a little more convenient because you're standing right there by the ink. You can also do it on the main software on the automatic cutting screen when you go to printer. So we're going to go to the maintenance tab. Again, this is on the Matthews touchscreen that's on the stand with the power unit. It's going to come up here to print heads. We're going to be on the flush and we can either choose cleaner or ink and then the flush line again. Pretty similar to the blade saw. And again, 48 hours. If it's going to be more than 48 hours before we print, we're going to do it no matter which type of ink and cleaner we're running. The ink system consumables. This is that wonderful brush we talked about. This is supplied with Matthews. One brush per print head is what comes with it. This is the Matthews part number if you want to order a Matthews brush. Ink and cleaner. Matthews will offer ink in the small pint-sized containers that we use on the saw. They also will sell you ink in bulk if you use enough ink. If you do purchase it in bulk, I recommend you saving extra bottles of ink and cleaner because that's what fits in the holders, and the bottles do wear out or can wear out. So you're going to want to save some of those bottles that are coming with the saw or that you use before you switch to the larger quantities. We do have empty bottles available if you need them. We recommend that you store it between 40 degrees and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. There is an expiration date on those bottles of ink and cleaner, so you do need to rotate them. We don't want you to have to throw out a bunch of ink and cleaner because it never was rotated. Just be aware there is an expiration date. The viscosity of this print of the ink and cleaner can change over time. It is flammable. It needs to be stored away from potential sparks or flames. And we want to leave the bottles sealed until we're ready to use them. Try not to open up a bunch of partial bottles. There's really no reason to do that. You might have an open cleaner bottle that you're using for cleaning, but you should only have one open at a time. There's an actual way to replace the fluid bottles so you don't damage the filter assemblies. So we're going to have this video. We're going to let this video play real quick. This is also available on YouTube.
Replacing fluid reservoir bottles on MiTek saws. Only use ink specified for your saw. Other ink, including ink used on other MiTek equipment, will destroy the printhead and result in costly repairs. For the best results, replace the ink and cleaner bottles before they are completely empty. If they run completely out of fluid, you must flush the printhead. For the Cyber and Cyber AT saws, replace a fluid bottle when the fluid falls out of sight. For the blade saws, replace a fluid bottle when there is about 1/2 inch of fluid left in the bottle. Supplies needed are gloves, goggles, scissors or knife, new ink or cleaner bottle, rags. For the blade saw, push in on an E-stop. Do a proper lockout-tagout procedure on the machine's main electrical panel. Push in on the yellow slide lever on the machine's main air pressure regulator and do a proper lockout-tagout procedure on it. Open the 2 bottom doors below the saw chamber. Shake the ink bottle vigorously. Look at the air pressure gauge closest to the bottles and make sure it reads 0 pressure. Remove the lid from the new bottle you are replacing. With the knife or scissors, cut a small X opening in the foil on the top of the bottle. Do not break the foil seal from the edge of the bottle. Pull out the bottle you are replacing and remove the filter and lid from the empty bottle, and screw it onto the new bottle and put it back in the rack. Remove the guard covering the top clamp assembly and save the hardware for reuse. Here is the general location of the purge valves. Reverse the lockout-tagout procedure on the main air pressure regulator. Use the purge valves from each of the printheads your machine has, placing the hose in the empty container you just removed, and pull back on the front of the purge valve until a steady flow of ink comes out. Put the lid on the old bottle once you are done with all the purge valves your machine has. For the blade and Cyber or Cyber AT saws, the ink filter assembly consisting of cap, pickup tube, and filter should be replaced at least once a month due to the working environment it operates in. The cleaner filter assembly, consisting of cap, pickup tube, and filter, replace every 2 to 3 months. Refer to Blade Parts Guide online for the correct part number to order for either of the saws. For the Cyber and Cyber AT saws, turn off the compressor on the printing system before attempting to loosen a reservoir lid. Shake the ink bottle vigorously. Look at the air pressure gauge to the bottles and make sure it reads 0 pressure. Remove the lid from the new bottle you are replacing. With the knife or scissors, cut a small opening in the foil on the top of the bottle. Pull out the bottle you are replacing and remove the filter and lid from the empty bottle and screw it onto the new bottle. Put it back in the rack. Use the purge valve the same way as explained earlier to make sure all the air is out of the line. Discard old ink and reservoir bottles according to government specifications.
A little bit of overview over the ink is the blade saw has been tested and ran with acetone-based ink. That is the only ink base that we recommend for a blade saw. Now the Cyber ATs can use the acetone-based ink, but when they are manufactured, they are tested with an alcohol-based ink and cleaner. Very important that it is either the ink and the cleaner are matched to the same base. Acetone and alcohol do not mix. They cause damage to printheads when they are mixed. If you have a blade saw and you want to run one type of ink, so that's all you have in your plant, we can walk you through switching out that to an acetone based system. If you do have both of them in your plant, there's not an issue with that, but make sure that the acetone and the alcohol chemicals do not get mixed or swapped. They should not be stored near each other, just to keep them from accidentally grabbing the wrong one. Okay? The rules about switching inks for the Cyber is you would flush and purge 2 containers of ink through it. You would switch to the new style cleaner, run a quart or one of the containers through that, and then you could introduce that same base ink system to that. Very important that if it's an acetone system, that we're running acetone cleaner and acetone ink. If it's alcohol, the same reason, alcohol cleaner, alcohol base. So when we replace those bottles, again, we're going to want to have some gloves that can handle the acetone. We want goggles or glasses. We use a knife. Not the best picture here, but this is a knife. We have our correct base ink and cleaner. We have some shop towels or some rags. We're going to need a bottle, lockout, tag out, and we're going to need a vacuum. And we're going to need that brush because we're going to clean the area. We're going to clean the print heads, especially after we flush and all that good stuff. We just want to make sure we end up with a good clean set of print heads ready to go. Replacing the bottles, the fluid bottles on a blade saw. Here we have the 2 ink bottles and a cleaner bottle. Again, you may only have 1 ink bottle, depends on how many print heads and how many valves. The label should be on the tubing to help keep that straight. We have ink lines, we have cleaner lines. Again, there's our good old important pop-off valve. We're going to make sure that's in working order. I physically pull this up and down a couple times just to make sure it's not sticking. I want to make sure this valve is working. I want to make sure it's going to protect my print heads. So we're going to lock out the air pressure coming into the saw. We're going to make sure that these bottles feel like there's no pressure in there, the gauge is at 0, we're actually going to pull up the safety valve, make sure we got all the air out. We're going to slowly crack the lids for the cleaner and the ink. This area is very important to make sure that this has all been cleaned out before we get ready to replace these fluid bottles. You can see here the fluid bottle lid has got the filter on it and the pickup tube, and it's going to hang there. You don't have a lot of slack in these lines. If you don't clean all the sawdust out of this area, your pickup tube and filter assembly is going to lay in that sawdust. So we want to do everything we can to keep these filters and pickup tubes out of the sawdust. You can kind of see the T's and all the connections here. These are some of them we're talking about in the maintenance area. When we're talking about inspect the hoses and the fittings, we shouldn't see a bunch of ink or a little bit of ink coming out of any of these. We might have a crack in our systems. This is a good time to inspect this as well. The Cyber AT, the fluid bottles on the Cyber AT, this is the standalone pressure unit we talked about. It does have the power button. It also has the power cable. When I do this myself, I turn the power off and I unplug this just so I know nothing's going to accidentally turn power on to this power unit. On the very top of it, Matthews puts this nice little label there showing us how to change our ink or our cleaner bottles. They're showing us power off. They're showing us to slowly undo the cap and filter assembly and then slide the bottle up. I will tell you, this is 4 to 7 psi and we're slowly popping that cap off. The new container goes in and we're going to cut an X with that knife that we have in the top here. We want to cut it from edge to edge so that filter assembly slides through easily. The filter assembly can crack up top where it connects to the cap, and we're trying to protect those filters. We try not to peel off the foil because we have to get it all off if we peel it, and we don't want anything to fall in the ink, and we want a good seal at the top. There is a small O-ring in this filter cap assembly. We're going to reattach it, and then we're going to repressurize our system here. That is basically the replacing the fluid bottles on a Cyber AT saw. Again, the purge valve, we just switched. We're going to grab a bottle here. We're going to take off the cap off that purge. Spring-loaded valve is here, and we're going to purge it until the chemical that we just put in there is coming through. And then we're going to switch to the other one, either ink or cleaner. So you will have to do this twice to get ink and cleaner through the system. So if you're replacing cleaner and ink bottles, I would purge cleaner, get it to the printhead, and then I would do ink as well. I would do them both and then do the one last that you want in the system at the time. So if you're going to replace the bottles and then go home for the weekend, I would go ahead and purge ink so I know ink is to the printhead, and then I would go ahead and do my cleaner. Maintenance and maintaining your print system. We're to the cap and filter assembly we talked about. Matthews and MiTek got together and came up with 1 month on an ink filter cap assembly, just because of the environment we run these in, just because of the sawdust and everything that's down in our system, and the chance we take is sucking up contaminants from that ink and cleaner bottle. Cleaner, they're saying 2 to 3 months lifespan on that filter cap assembly. On the blade saw, just so we're trying to protect these print heads, there is a guard on the front side of this print head. You want to make sure this guard is in place, the screws are all in there and they're flush, nothing's coming loose. This is here to protect your print heads. If something happens to the roller or this gets adjusted, we're just protecting this print head because this is the area that the board is sliding across in front of. Not all of us are getting nice straight 2x4s and 2x6s. So there's a chance this print head could get brushed by a board or damaged. So this guard is there to help protect your print head. This switch, I know it's in some of the other pictures if you look. This switch is not on all saws. You will only have this switch if you have a edge printer mounted on the top up here on the ski. This switch tells it that the ski is a board and will allow the print head to print. So if you may not have the switch if you don't have an edge printer. So parts you may need, if you're buying in bulk, you may need some spare ink bottles or cleaner bottles. Tubing, if you have a tubing issue where you get a damaged piece of tubing, if you can't cut the tubing down and the length now is too short, it is 1/4-inch tubing. You can get it local sometimes, but you need to make sure it is safe for the base chemical type you're using on your ink or cleaner. Same thing with your simple barb fittings or your tees. If you need to splice it, make sure you're using something that is acceptable for acetone or alcohol, depending on what system you have. Highly, highly recommend only using Matthews ink or cleaner. Nothing good comes out of using something else and then having a problem with your print head. So let's look at some of these part numbers that we have. So common part numbers would be the filter cap. Filter caps are the same on the blade and on the Cyber AT. The cleaner and the ink are the same cap assemblies as well. The Matthews brush, we have a part number for that. That would be purchased from Matthews. This empty bottle you can purchase through MiTek. We do keep those in inventory, and you would only need that empty bottle as if you're purchasing ink in bulk. And if I would always have spare bottles available. And then that 1/4-inch tubing, this is a part number. We sell it by the foot. This is the tubing we need for acetone or alcohol based, same tubing from MiTek. Again, you might be able to get it local. Just make sure you're using it for the correct base. Purge valves, we have a MiTek part number for that. Ink line couplings, we have both sides here, and you can see they are O-ring types. So this is one thing you're looking for that could be damaged when you're looking to see if there's any kind of leakage or anything when we're doing our daily inspections, looking at our system. So for the blade saw, these are Matthews part numbers. This is the Matthews cleaner and ink. This is for the acetone based system. And I believe Matthews sells it in a box of six 1-liter bottles of cleaner and ink. On the Cyber and Cyber AT saws, again, this would be what we use in the factory to begin with. This is what we used back when there was just straight up Cybers and the Cyber ATs. We ran an alcohol-based system. This is the cleaner, and this is the ink number from Matthews. Again, if you want to switch this Cyber and Cyber AT over to an acetone-based, this is completely acceptable. Matthews is where you're going to purchase your ink and cleaner. MiTek does not sell ink and cleaner. We let Matthews take care of the ink and cleaner directly from them. So hopefully this gave you a little bit of help on maintaining and cleaning your print heads. We used a couple different sources today. There's multiple videos that are very helpful on our YouTube page. We used the MiTek us.com website for our parts guide and equipment manuals to prepare this slideshow. And that is all available to you guys out there. Simply going to the MiTek website and going under automation and scrolling down to parts and manuals and machinery down at the bottom of the page there. All this is there. And if you have any further questions, you can always reach out to the automation support help desk. 1-800-523-3380. That number should be on every piece of MiTek equipment out there before it leaves our facility. So if you have any questions, just reach out to us. Thank you for watching and have a great weekend.